Yeah, on the note about playing for different coaches, I think most NBA players would agree with me when I say no NBA coach is perfect, but there are some redeeming qualities of all NBA coaches. There's a reason they're head coaches. And when I listen to you talk, and I've gotten to know you a little bit, but like you're, part of the NBPA executive committee. You're a guy who I look at and I'm like, I could see Grant being in the front office or coaching one day. And when you think about the coaches you've played for, Brad and Ime and Joe, for each one of those guys, like, is there something that stands out about them in terms of their strengths or their ability to relate to players or their exes, whatever it may be? Is there something that you've taken from each one of those guys?
Yeah, so it's funny because I thought about this the other day. Brad, I always say, was a great X's and O's coach. He was a great like analytics guy. He followed that and followed the numbers, but also did a good job of like making sure like we drew up a play. You felt like he was directly involved. While Ime, I felt like he was the best of both worlds. He was able to not only do X's and O's, defense, and everything like that, and has a grit to him that allowed him to relate to players in a personal level that allowed him to challenge guys to be the best they could possibly be, while also having the respect enough to understand that he doesn't have to challenge them always. He can lift them up too. So that's why I think that Ime is probably the best one I've played for. And then with Joe, he's similar to Brad in the sense that he's like very analytic, but he also has an offensive based mind. He's a guy that sees offense very, very well. And he's incredible because I think that he'll be able to progress as time goes on and become more comfortable in his role and have a lot of great success in winning because he'll provide the team with a great mentality of pace and spacing and open shots and threes, which is this new generation and new age. And then he'll continue to develop on the other side of the ball and continue to develop on the staff around him and listening. So like that's what I'll say about each of them is like Brad is feel like he's more analytic, very X's and O's based. The player side, that wasn't necessarily his strength, but he tried his best to be respectful and honest with guys. Ime was blunt to direct to the point, very good at both sides, and was able to tell a player either you're not fucking playing or you're playing doing this much. And he was very, very direct and honest about everything, which was what I respected the most because I love coaches who are like that. And then Joe was more like he followed the analytics in terms of matchup based games as well as like where his offensive style was get up threes, and the more threes you make, you'll be the team.
Great. JJ has talked about these Celtics the teams from the last couple of years about the connectivity on both sides of the ball. He says it over and over again, the C word. How would you describe this connectivity when these teams were like humming at their best? What do you think made it so effective and so special?
Yeah, the funny part about it is each team was a little bit different. You know, my rookie year team with Kemba, Gordon, Jason, Jalen, like that was like JT and JV kind of coming into their own right. And the connectivity came from the vets understanding that and not trying to push to diminish their light. And everyone kind of respected them in a way and tried to allow them to grow. Then the year under Ime, it was a mix of like at the start, we were trying to figure out, get our footing, and truly understand what type of team we wanted to be. And then as we did that and we realized that defense was our structure and our priority, everybody bought in and just kind of fell into like a dog mentality and understanding like the dogs were going to play and also understanding that you have to be able to compete on both ends of the ball to win the game. And then under Joe, I think everyone came together as players in their own right and also being understanding that we've been with each other for so long and guys were more willing to have a voice and step up and lead. During the Ime years, I feel like it was more like Ime was the leader and everybody followed and believed and trusted. While I think during that following year, players kind of believed in each other and trusted and pushed each other forward.
Do you think some of that is just, this is not a knock on Joe, but do you think some of that is just Joe being younger, being a rookie coach, being thrust into a head coaching position, whatever it was, 4 days before training camp? Like, do you know what I mean by that? Because I think the credibility part has to be earned. And when you've played in the NBA like Ime, and Ime, certainly had opportunities to interview for head coaching jobs and served under Pop. or coached under Pop, but it just seems like Joe, to me, got put in a tough situation to start this year. And the credibility part is so important in the NBA. And I don't necessarily think like he got a fair shake in that regard. And you were there. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that because you're put in a position where a team that just went to the finals and the goal is to be able to go back. You have, quote, a better, more talented team with Malcolm added and potential Danilo before he got hurt. And now you're asked to go from being a backseat assistant to the head coach and lead the guys who were under the most recent head coach. So I think it was a difficult position, but I also think that as time will go on, he'll be able to come into his own right as a coach. I think last year was more, I don't want to mess anything up. So it was like, I don't want to ruin the ship that's on its way and sailing. So rather than like truly trying to change things, it was more so like I'll adjust the things that I feel like we needed for the finals and to get better. So that's why the offensive side of the ball was so emphasized. Versus now I feel like he'll be able to really put in the principles that he believes in as a coach and truly coach the guys to his fullest extent and level, because now he has a full year of head coaching under his belt. He'll have a little bit of respect not only within the locker room, but also in the organization and league. So he'll be able to take a little bit more risk and be a little more aggressive in his style. Versus, I think before it was more like, I'm here and I'm going to lead these guys, but at the same time, we've all been there. Let's trust the players and trust like where direction they're trying to push us in.
You guys were a top 2 offense and a top 2 defense. So on a spreadsheet, you guys were fucking awesome. You know what I mean? Like it's not. I think it's more about what I watched versus what the numbers said, and the numbers were still fantastic. That Joe still coached a top defense in the league, but it just seemed like at times the rotations, the trust in the drop at times, the trust in the switch at times, the late game matchups at times, it all felt a little discombobulated. And again, like I think we talked about this at the White Party a little bit. I think at times when you are a head coach, you're under an insane amount of scrutiny. And I think for someone who's going through it for the first time, in the same way that we look at a rookie NBA player or a second-year NBA player, right? We allow them growing pains and allow them to learn lessons along the way. And whether it's because it's Boston or whether it's because you guys had been in the finals before, like I think to some degree, Joe probably didn't get a fair shake in terms of the scrutiny that he was under. Is that fair that I'm saying that? Like, or am I off base on that?
I wouldn't say necessarily it's fair or off base because I think that both him and Ime got a little bit of that. Joe probably had a little bit worse just because he came into a situation that was already established and had to kind of lead a crew that on paper was more talented than the years prior. But I think that they both handled it with a good level of confidence and maturity. Joe did a good job of taking things on his head and trying to take the blame a lot. Right. And also, try to say that he has to be better as a coach, which I think that, he had a little bit of that, had to be better, but also at the same time, I thought he did a phenomenal job with the times that he truly was truly challenged. He could have crumbled and folded completely, and he did it. So I definitely think that he definitely received a lot of scrutiny and definitely received a lot of the blame. While as players, we probably could have helped him a little bit more too, because I think that's a little bit of a difference between Joe and Ime too. The difference between like them both, Ime was a little more player empowering in the sense of like we were on the court and we saw something, we were able to like just change the coverage immediately and like trust one. He would trust the guys and what we saw, and he would ask us why. Like he would ask us like, all right, like we're playing the Heat. And Jimmy Butler and Bam, they're pick and roll or they're starting to screen with Jimmy. And I'm like, all right, let's move Al to Jimmy and let's move me to Bam. And let's switch anything Bam and Jimmy and then anything with them on somebody else will play as a drop or as a touch and make sure they're the guys that have to make the play with the ball afterwards. And he'd be like, yeah, cool, let's do that. And he like would respect it, and because he sees it himself on the court as well. And then while Joe, I think he had more of a like, I wanted to kind of dictate the matchups, dictate the coverages we were in, and have like a full kind of control of the game because he's observing it from the side. But I think there's got to be a mix of like both, in the sense of players have to have that communication and ability to walk up and be like, hey, either we don't think this is working, or at the same time, like the coach has to be able to have the trust in the player to be like, no, it might not be because like the coverage itself is bad. It's just you guys aren't playing hard. I think that's what Ime did like a great job of saying, like, no, we're not going to freaking let you get away with this. He would literally like, we're not letting you bullshit through this game. And next you know, you would like, he would say, go guard the ball. And you would have this like sense of like, okay, maybe it's like, let's try this a little bit harder. And if it doesn't work, then we can switch. While I think that it was a little bit of kind of figuring it out on that side of the ball this past year. Like if things weren't working, let's try something else. And if it doesn't work, go back to what it was rather than addressing the issue in the moment. And I think that's part of the reason why there was a little bit less connectivity on that side of the ball, and like the player empowerment, but also the regard and the communication aspect from coach to player. But I think that if you look at even with Ime, we had struggles on the offensive side of the ball. Well, I think on average we had a better offense this year by I think an extra 5 points per game. So there's going to be both challenges and successes for each coach you play for. It's just a matter of understanding what those challenges are and how you can have solutions for them.